Welcome. I'm Nina Gryphon, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today we'll talk about the astrology of the third week of September, covering the 15th through the 21st, 2024. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you for all of your support. If you would like to become a patron and get access to my monthly Magical Elections ebook, which teaches you how and when to make astrological talismans, go to patreon.com/Nina Gryphon. You will also get access to these forecasts early, as well as other exclusive content and opportunities to discuss astrology and magic with my Patreon community. September 17th will have a lunar eclipse at 25 Pisces. This lunar eclipse is the big event this week, but really not just this week. As is often the case with eclipses, their effects can start to be felt prior to the date itself, and it will be felt for a long time after. This eclipse is in Pisces, conjoining Saturn on one side and Neptune on the other. In Pisces, the effects of the eclipse will involve the sea and water in general, as well as islands and peninsulas, whether we're looking at flooding, storms coming from the sea, or even conflict over seas, islands, and peninsulas. This eclipse occurs in the third decan of Pisces, which is ruled by Mars, so the element of conflict or aggression will be present, but in the Piscean or watery setting. This eclipse could also presage earthquakes and tsunamis, with Mercury in Virgo opposing Saturn in Pisces on the eclipse axis. Mercury is the wind, and generally he is a destabilizing influence in weather astrology. The duration of the eclipse is a little over 4 hours, so we would expect the effects of this eclipse to manifest sometime between September 17th and late January 2025, or a little over 4 months. As with all eclipses, we must recognize that their manifestations may come later than the eclipse date. People tend to only focus on the days around the eclipse, but their effects tend to be much more persistent, especially those of solar eclipses, which can create impacts for years after the fact. Even the effects of lunar eclipses tend to hang around for months. This eclipse has last week's Venus trine Jupiter still present, and this is an especially hopeful and encouraging aspect, since Jupiter is the ruler of the eclipse as the sign ruler of Pisces. One of the big themes that this eclipse will bring is liberation, freedom, and thanks to the trine from Venus, the idea of peace and harmony. Venus is highly interesting in this chart because she represents women, and since eclipses act most consistently in the public sphere, we are talking about famous women who are household names. Venus is very powerful in this horoscope because she conjoins the royal fixed star Spica. Spica brings good fortune and abundance, as well as elevation and status, and it is one of the few stars that seem to be entirely positive. So look for the next 4 months or so to bring elevation and status to women who are described by Venus in Libra. It's also worth mentioning the Venus-Pluto square, with Venus on the more powerful side of it, as she is in the overcoming position relative to Pluto in her own sign, and conjoining a royal fixed star. Ironically, Jupiter, although he is the ruler of the eclipse, is actually far more in the crosshairs of conflict than Venus, since he squares the eclipse axis, and those jovial values of freedom and expansion will be sorely tested. So this is an interesting eclipse, bringing confrontation on the one hand, but also opportunity and growth on the other. September 18th, Mercury at 15 Virgo will oppose Saturn retrograde in Pisces. This aspect is nearly perfected in the eclipse chart, and it represents the spiritual substance of the world, the logos, at odds with the material realm. Oppositions always represent confrontations, so here we have the divine word, which brings order to the world, in confrontation with the imperfect realm in which we live. In the cosmic model represented by the Kabbalah, for example, which is strongly influenced by Neoplatonism and Gnosticism, the material realm is seen as the shards of broken vessels which were inadequate to contain the divine light. These shards contain sparks of that divine light, however, and the goal is to gather all the divine lights via contemplative concentration and the meditative use of holy names. Both of these are mercurial or hermetic activities. I'm simplifying a great deal here, but hopefully you get the picture. Around the time of this Mercury-Saturn opposition, the Saturnian realm of the broken shards is being transformed, maybe against its will, but transformed nonetheless, by hermetic practices which seek to bring the divine logos down here into this realm. This tells us something about the nature of the opposition aspect. It's hostile, but even hostility is a kind of relationship. When we are dealing with oppositions, usually a frank and direct confrontation is required, and even some turbulence and conflict may be needed when we are seeking to unify broken pieces into a single whole. So an opposition presents the chance to make ourselves available to the other, and even though the contact may be harsh, it is ultimately in the service of creating genuine harmony and unity. September 20th, the Sun at 28 Virgo opposes Neptune in Pisces. You can refer back to my video week 1 of September on my thoughts about Neptune as representing the universe in a state of chaos, without any kind of intelligence or organizing principle. In helping us understand the mythos of the ocean, today I wanted to explore the fish avatar of the god Vishnu, called Matsya, which means fish in Sanskrit, the language of ancient Indian scholarship. Matsya is usually thought of as the first of Vishnu's 10 major avatars or incarnations. The story begins at the end of a kalpa, a world age, when a demon named Hayagriva steals the Vedas that escape from a yawn of the creator god Brahma. That's its own story. Vishnu discovers the theft, so he incarnates as a tiny fish to get the Vedas back. Meanwhile, on Earth, the king Manu renounces the world, and since Brahma has been pleased with Manu's austerities, Brahma grants Manu his wish to rescue the world at the time of the pralaya, the general dissolution at the end of the current world age. One day, Manu encounters a tiny fish, which says that it fears being swallowed by a larger fish, and appeals to Manu for protection. In return, the fish promises to protect Manu from the upcoming great flood. The fish is none other than Vishnu himself, and Manu recognizes the little fish as divine. He agrees to protect the fish, and he nurtures it to a much greater size, so it doesn't have to worry about being eaten. And then he releases it into the ocean. The fish thanks Manu and tells him the date of the upcoming flood. On the appointed day, the gods grant Manu a boat that carries all types of living creatures and all varieties of seeds. He ties the boat to a horn on the fish's head, using the cosmic serpent Shesha as a rope, and Matsya then tows the ship to the Himalayas through storms. In the Matsya Purana text, Manu asks questions to Matsya, and their dialogue comprises the remainder of the text of the Purana. Matsya teaches the highest knowledge to Manu and to sages to prepare them for the next cycle of existence. Vishnu as Matsya then goes on to destroy the demon Hayagriva and rescue the Vedas. So, ocean or Neptune is the element that has the power to completely change our world. It can actually be the cosmic eraser that ends one world age and begins another, as in the story of the Great Flood. Yet the illuminating power of truth in the form of a divine avatar who comes to rescue the human race and sacred knowledge can cut through even the absolute chaos represented by the ocean. The sun represents truth and the highest knowledge, and in Virgo in particular, the sun represents structured knowledge, like the Vedic texts being rescued by Matsya. In a cosmic sense, this aspect represents the ending of an era, especially with Neptune near the end of its sign, and the glimmers of truth that shine through and help bridge the old era and the new world. Remember this every time that the Sun and Neptune make a hard aspect in 2024 and 2025, when Neptune is in the very last degrees of Pisces. There is a major new epoch emerging with the transit of Neptune from Pisces into Aries, and the Sun represents the wisdom and truth that carries us like a divine fish into the new age. Notice that we don't carry the wisdom, but instead it is our vehicle and our safety. September 20th, Mercury will have his morning set at 19 Virgo. Mercury now enters the beams as he picks up speed and pursues the conjunction of the Sun. Mercury is now in the last part of the last phase of his cycle, representing transformation that is now nearing its end. The cycle began when Mercury and the Sun conjoined in Gemini on June 14th, and since it happened in Mercury's sign, we knew that the cycle would be about transformation and offers the potential of bringing divine order into the disordered realm of this world. So Mercury is now going underground, and his influence will become more subtle and difficult to see, but still present. As he passes through the realm of the dead, the underworld, he is rejuvenated, purified, and transformed by his eventual conjunction with the Sun on September 30th. This conjunction will end the current cycle and start a new cycle. We'll talk about that in the week 5 September forecast, so stay tuned for that. September 21st, Mercury at 20 Virgo will square Jupiter in Gemini. This is Mercury under the beams in Virgo, so Mercury's now doing deep underground hermetic alchemy, acting on Jupiter in Mercury's own sign. Mercury represents knowledge as it's applied in the world, while Jupiter represents the high ideals of wisdom and spiritual teaching. So even though they are meeting in a square, this is a very powerful and actually positive combination that allows us to access deeper wisdom through spiritual practices. In the mundane world, this combination can be highly energizing financially, since Mercury represents business and Jupiter is wealth. I view Mercury and Jupiter aspects as being some of the most magical combinations there are, because they can give us access to accelerated spiritual growth and development. Thanks for watching. I'm Nina Gryphon, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel.